we're going to look back and see Daniel Jones, or not Daniel Jones. I'm looking at Daniel Jones's face. That's why I said that. But he's my screensaver background. But it's Hello and welcome to another episode of Too Many Leagues, a Dynasty Fantasy Football podcast. I am Derek Thomas, and I am joined by the great Aaron Spires. Aaron, how are you doing? I don't see a sling. I believe you have a surgically repaired collarbone. How you feeling?
I feel like the $6 million man. I've got 6 or 7 screws and a plate in my shoulder. I found out today that in about 10 weeks I can play sports again, which will be pretty exciting.
That's pretty good.
Yeah,
that's
so it's a banner day for me. I've had some good news. I don't have to wear a sling, and I can lift my arm over my head.
That's huge. That's huge. And you had, from what I could tell in the leagues that we're in, it seemed like you had a great week 11. Is that what it was? Week 11? Like you were putting up scores that I didn't think were possible in some of those leagues. What was the key? Was Taysom's package? Was that the key to your success?
Well, in a couple leagues, I did start Taysom. Absolutely, I did. Some out of necessity, no George Kittle, and so I played Taysom, and some because I thought that he was a good play, but I obviously didn't expect some 45 points or whatever it was that he ended up getting in full PPR there. But what a game, right? Like, yeah. 10 targets, 8 receptions, 50 yards. So, it's not like he's picking up big chunks, but then 3 rushes. Was it only 3 rushes for 150? And then
I know he had like 200 yards like total.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
offense.
And then he had the 2 passes. Also threw an interception.
And a fumble. Like it was like he did everything almost that you can do on a football field.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I wanted them to send him out there to kick an extra point or something, because why not? It was kind of a historic game where I think we probably just saw the best game of Taysom Hill's career, which is fun. He's been a fixture in the fantasy football world for however many years, for better or for worse, whether we're frustrated with him or not. So, I looked it up. He had 7 rushes for 138 yards, 3 touchdowns, 8 receptions for 50 yards. Where are his passing stats? They're on a different level, and I can't see them. But yeah, I mean, he was doing everything. It was really the only thing working for the Saints yesterday.
Yeah.
The Saints, absolutely. Who, by the way, they are right back into contention in that division. I mean, this isn't really what we talk about here, but I just the league landscape really took a lot of shifts this week. The Falcons took a big loss. Maybe we'll talk about them a little later. But yeah, it was a fun week with just ridiculously high scores in a lot of leagues. I would go through and check your league history and see if any scoring records were set yesterday, because I know a few of my leagues that was the case. Just really high scores.
Yeah, I mean, I think we don't normally talk about what happened in the games, or at least the broader kind of like league context, but I do think it's important to talk about the Saints, and in particular because there's going to be, I think, some changes or potential changes in quarterback there. And I think how the rest of this year plays out will determine whether they decide to make a move to say goodbye to Derek Carr, or whether they decide to, bite that very expensive bullet that they already have and keep him that extra year before the cost starts dropping. Right.
Right.
If we see some deep losses over the final stretch of the season, they might decide to move on. And so, we're talking about quarterbacks. I think there's like just a big shifting landscape for dynasty quarterbacks, and Carr's one of them. But there's also a bunch of folks that I think we should talk about, in particular, some of those rookies. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering, Going into the year, I was really excited about two of the rookies, obviously, and that was, for me, it was Caleb Williams and Drake May.
Mm.
I was a little bit softer on Jaden Daniels, and had a little bit of love for Bo Nix, but it seems like everything's kind of thrown up into the air. And if we were to redraft things, it would be a little bit different. How are you viewing the kind of rookie QBs as we're, I guess about 2/3 of the way through the fantasy season?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I remember at the time we were doing rookie drafts and superflex leagues, and Bo Nix was, I mean, he was going late first round. Sometimes he was even slipping into the early second, which was interesting given like the sorry. I think Aaron is going to wrangle our third podcast member for today, his dog Connor. But I'll vamp. I'll talk about Bo Nix. And I think a lot of people, I don't know how well he was being viewed coming out. I think he was an older prospect, and that kind of deflates value a little bit. But he was walking into a really good starting opportunity in Denver, and we weren't sure what to expect from that team, and he has played exceptionally well, and seems like he might be in that high end QB2, low end QB1 area. I mean, if you're redrafting, say you're doing a startup draft, how high do you think Bo Nix is now? Like where in what range of quarterbacks do you think he's kind of falling within?
I think it's really interesting to use Bo Nix as that kind of case study because, every month Dynasty League Football puts out their ADP, and we don't have the ADP out for November yet. But if you look at the Superflex ADP for October, Nix was going as QB 23, okay, around 64, 65 in a startup. That's just ahead of JJ McCarthy, Michael Penix, Kirk Cousins, and a bit behind Sam Darnold, Tua, Justin Fields, Baker Mayfield, folks like that. And looking at the last few weeks of Nix's performance, you have to think that RB23 is going to jump up maybe 10 spots, right? I see that.
Where was Drake May in October?
So Drake May at that time was QB 19, and he's another one that I think you're going to see. I think you'll see Nix and May somewhere around that QB 11 to QB 15, 16.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree with that.
Somebody like a Trevor Lawrence might drop down. Somebody like a Dak Prescott might drop down. People like that, I see them potentially catapulting.
Yeah, and then like you think about where you were getting Bo Nix and rookie drafts, like that's what you hope for, right? You kind of take a chance on a guy like that has a path to production in his rookie year, and you hope you can cash in on it. You hope it can benefit your team. I mean, if you're picking it toward the end of a rookie draft, typically you had a good season the year before, so adding a player like that, those teams I would imagine are doing quite well this season also. So I mean that's what you love to see, and I think it's interesting that he's kind of jumped up. I mean, JJ McCarthy, no fault of his own, that he got injured and now has had to have I think a second surgery on his knee, which the Vikings are like, situation normal, but like I don't know, that's a little concerning. So and Nix has definitely jumped ahead of him in terms of rankings, and he's right there in that, from that class QB3, QB2 range. I mean, honestly, where I mean, Caleb Williams obviously is, it's kind of a wait and see if he's going to reach that potential. There have been some flashes of it, but if you're just grading it on how they've played this year, Bo Nix has definitely adjusted to the NFL better than I think anybody thought he would.
Yeah, I didn't understand. I mean, you're talking about the rookie draft last off season, and I picked him up in a lot of spots, and towards the back end of the first round, and sometimes up as late as 202, 203. If he was sitting there and I had a pick, he was a go-to pick for me, unless I was quite set at quarterback. And if I didn't have a pick, but I could package some picks to move up, I did that regularly to get Nix, because we knew that he was not an incredible prospect. He was older, obviously, but was a solid prospect and was walking into a situation that guaranteed a year's worth of starts, unless he was absolutely horrible. And so just from a pure value standpoint, the insulation on his value is going to be, a late first, early second. He's going to hold that value. And if he does anything like he just did, now, a mid first, he's gained significant value when it comes to the market. And he's the type of player, I think, where if you have him, you're happy to have him if you're competitive this year, because he's been playing really well. Sean Payton's done well to design an offense that works with him. Considering, again, outside of Courtland Sutton, he doesn't have a ton of weapons. Troy Franklin, his former teammate from Oregon, is coming along slowly. He was a hyper-productive prospect, but there was some off-field issues, and people were worried about his athletic testing. Marvin Mims obviously tested really well, but was nothing until just yesterday in the game. Or 2 days ago, I guess. But Deshaun Vele,
7th round pick,
right?
Yeah.
So it's not like he's working with superstars. Courtland Sutton's a fine possession receiver, like kind of typical classic X receiver. But he's able to make it work. And so I think, if you're happy to have him on your team, if you're competitive this year, you're happy to have him on your team if you're rebuilding this year, because you know that you have a piece that potentially can get you through over the next couple of years. But if you're deep at quarterback, he's also the type of piece that I think that you could probably move for a tasty profit right now. And so it's the same thing that we saw with Daniel Jones a number of years ago, where Jones was not a good player, clearly just benched, not a great prospect, overdrafted at, what was that, number 6 overall? I think did they take him at 6? Took Barkley at 2 and him at 6 or whatever it was. But it didn't make any sense to not draft him in your rookie drafts, because he was clearly poised to be a starting quarterback in the league, and his value was insulated year over year, right? And then he had one good season, and his value spiked, right? So at the very least, you're able to get off of the player if you're not seeing all that much, and at the best, you're able to kind of gain decent value and potentially assets that help your team going forward, right? So. Yeah, I mean, Nix is also just great from a story perspective, right? Because everybody did count him out, right? Everybody said, "Oh, here's a reach," But Peyton knows what he's doing, clearly, despite my dislike of just the personality of the guy.
Yeah, and Peyton spoke very highly of him when they drafted him, and I think a lot of that may have been coach speak. I think that was kind of discounted because, of course, you're going to say that about the guy you just drafted, but it's all looking like that was a good pick, and maybe there was some truth to that. And the fact, I mean, he's an older prospect. Like, he's, I think, 6 months younger than Zach Wilson. So it was like, it really felt like weird that he was coming in so late and wasn't, valued that highly and was seen as a reach. But the nice thing about him having that first round draft capital is the Broncos aren't likely to move on from him now that he's kind of shown what he can do, so that, like you said, that value is now insulated, at least for the foreseeable future, next couple of years. So yeah, what do you think the lesson is there? Is the lesson to kind of, sometimes it's okay to take a player that maybe doesn't grade as well given the opportunity? Like, do you see that as a lesson, or how can we kind of adjust going forward, kind of with the examples that we've seen with like Daniel Jones and Bo Nix?
Yeah, I think that what it is that we need to not cling so tightly to our priors on the eval of a prospect when a team is saying something different, right? I mean, the game is market-based, right? Yeah. Dynasty is a market-based game. And we are being given some very, very clear information by teams when they're drafting quarterbacks, Michael Penix aside, because that's just a weird one. Yeah. But when they're drafting players like this, right? And so if it's a market-based game, we're trying to gain value in the market, right? And there are two phases, obviously, to Dynasty. Obviously, you need roster value and you need production. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to rookie drafts, that's an opportunity to acquire value, right? You're hoping for production as well, but definitely value. And I think that in these instances, we need to not think so much about it, but rather just kind of understand that a good bet is a good bet, and take it in those opportunities. Because I'm thinking about that draft class, right? So it's clear that there were going to be 3 quarterbacks that you take in front of Drake or of Bo Nix, right? And there was going to be 3 pass catchers in Bowers, Neighbors, and Marvin Harrison, and then probably Rome Odunze.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right. Now, after that, I think Nix is a totally fine selection.
Yeah, I mean, that next tier was like Brian Thomas, Ladd McConkey, Jonathan Brooks,
Xavier Worthy,
JJ McCarthy,
yeah,
and Bo Nix.
And McCarthy, by the way, again, injury.
Right. Yeah.
He's another person that you take, right? Mm-hmm. And people were taking him 107, 108, 109.
Yeah,
and they were taking Nix 112, 201, 202, 203.
That's kind of the weird one for me, and it's not even really hindsight, because I thought it was weird at the time how he was being valued so much higher than Nix specifically. I think a lot of that may have just the Vikings seemed like a better situation, a better offensive coach, maybe, and of course Justin Jefferson. But yeah, that value differential was really stark in a lot of the rookie drafts. He was going several picks ahead.
The other one that I'm interested in is Drake May, though. Right? I mean, and I was taking a look because he's obviously only started. What are we at now? 6 games, I think. But 7 games, I guess he's started now, and or he's played in 7 and he started 6, and on a kind of EPA, like extra point added per snap, he is second among the rookies, right? Behind Jaden Daniels, he's above Nix. He adds a bit more EPA per game, just a little bit more than Nix as well. Jaden Daniels is head and shoulders above everybody in terms of what he's adding. Yeah. Not necessarily in PPR points per game. Him and Nix are actually, within about half a point per game of each other. But just in terms of what he's able to add per snap and per game, Daniels is far and above. But with May, I mean, you're seeing a player at the very least that it doesn't look like the game's too big for him. It doesn't look like the game's too fast for him. And, we're not going to give you a lot of film takes, I think, on this show. That's not, I mean, maybe you are a big film watcher, and I watch the games, but I'm not a film watcher.
The same, yeah.
But you can see him command the offense. You can see him make adjustments on the line. The coaching staff seems to be comfortable letting him do that. you can see him instinctively extending plays the way that you saw him do with UNC, right?
Yeah.
And I think that he is probably the rookie quarterback that I would be most interested in trying to get more exposure to.
Yeah. He looks like fearless is the word I would use for him. Like he's really good at extending the play and finding an option to get the ball to. And he made a play in the Rams game this past week where he escaped and got rid of the ball and picked up I think it was third down and picked up a first down on a play that like probably had a very negligible chance of success. Like he's able to kind of snatch success from the jaws of defeat on a lot of plays, and that is good for fantasy, and it's good for it's good for real football too, which is going to give him job security. And he's also playing with, similar to Bo Nix, very little help on that offense. I mean, their best offensive players are Ramondre Stevenson and I guess Demario Douglas, like that, and Hunter Henry. Like that's the cast of characters that he's getting the ball to. And yeah, I think you're right. I think he can do it all. Like he can pick up. He runs a decent amount. He scrambles. He's just a really good player, and I think the Patriots once again are getting away with it and nabbing a player that I kind of expect. I guess they didn't get away with it with Mac Jones, but Drake May has already flashed more in his very short time as the starter than I think we saw from Mac Jones. So yeah, I'm excited about him. I feel like all these rookie quarterbacks I don't have enough of on my teams. And one that's kind of disappointed some people is Caleb Williams. We don't need to belabor that point, but what do you think's going on there? I've seen a lot of blaming the coaching, which I think is totally valid. But is this the type of thing where we're going to look back and see Daniel Jones, or not Daniel Jones? I'm looking at Daniel Jones's face. That's why I said that. But he's my screensaver background. But it's like, are we gonna look back at this and be like, was Caleb Williams the third best quarterback in this draft class? Is that? Do you think that's a possibility? Like, or are we jumping to too many conclusions too soon with such a young player?
I think we're jumping to too many conclusions too soon.
Yeah.
I think he certainly hasn't been a world beater. And part of the problem is that we're comparing him to Jaden Daniels, who has come out looking like a world beater. In a lot of ways, Caleb Williams has been poor this year, right? And part of that, I think, does rest with coaching. Shane Waldron, I mean, I think we've all probably seen now that famous clip from Radio Row during the Super Bowl last year or whatever, when Jackson Smith and Jigbo was asked about what they would expect, and his first response is, "Are we live?" Oh, well, he's a good guy. He's a good guy. Good luck. Right? Which tells you a lot, especially as you're seeing now. There was a lot of JSN haters, and he's putting together some games as they're starting to use them the way that I thought that he should be used last year. So, but we shouldn't at the same time, knock, or at least, sorry, we shouldn't at the same time hold him without any blame, right? I mean, as far as the rookie quarterbacks go, he's the lowest in completion percentage. I'm not including Penix, obviously, by a clear 4 or 5 points, right? He is, out of those 4, Daniels, Nix, May, and Caleb, he's the only one who is providing negative EPA per snap, right? Him and May are tied for touchdown passes, but he doesn't have the rushing acumen that Daniels has shown so far, right?
He did run a little bit more this past week. I think he had 9 carries for 70 yards this past week, which hopefully that can unlock some things for him. But yeah,
Well, I was going to say, and so, but that is the one thing that you do see is that over the last couple of weeks, or last week in particular, yeah, he did run more, and he had those 9 carries. He's up to 49 attempts on the year. He's got just over 300 yards, right? So, I mean, there are, and that's just over a 17% rush share for the team. The thing that we saw last week after the firing of Waldron was that his time to throw dropped, which I think is probably what he needs right now.
Yeah.
You watch it and he's making mistakes, but he's not making the most egregious mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
He's still showing flashes of what made him a great player at USC. My concern with it, I think, more than anything, is just what the offense will look like going forward, not this year, but next year and afterwards. What direction do they go in? Does Eberflus keep his job and kind of run the team outside of that? And how does that affect Williams? But I think, I would be willing to bet on him being a mid-range, mid to low end QB1 for a number of years going forward, at least in terms of value, because he's so young, with production somewhere between, QB 10 and QB 15, 16, something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's fine. He's not the clear-cut 101 like so many people thought that he might have been, but he's a solid piece, and I think he still has the upside to put it together.
Yeah, and we saw some flashes of that in the Carolina game and the Jacksonville game. He had 2 really decent fantasy performances back to back against 2 defenses that tend to give up good quarterback performances in fantasy. So if I've seen some people, get a little scared that we're entering like Bryce Young territory where he might be at risk of being benched or something like that. And I don't see that. Like, Bryce Young was not flashing anything last season. It was a totally different situation. And Caleb Williams was just a better talent to begin with. So I do think people are overreacting a little bit. Sky is falling mentality with him. And I think there are a lot of things that are changing, hopefully for the better. It's just kind of it's just kind of a whiplash situation, because it kind of felt like he was walking into one of the better situations given the weapons that he had, and we're seeing Drake May and Bo Nix play better without those weapons. So it's I get the frustration, and maybe if the Caleb Williams manager in your league is frustrated, it could be a buying opportunity. Although I don't, his value was very, very well insulated, so I don't see him getting much cheaper, but never hurts to try. I touched on Bryce Young briefly, but the Panthers also have an interesting quarterback situation. Bryce Young is going to start this week, but he obviously is on a very short leash in Carolina. Has played a little bit better, I think it's fair to say. Still not, living up to that number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft, pedigree that he has. But coming off a bye week, going and getting the start this week, I think we're hoping to see Bryce Young at least become like a QB2 for the rest of the season, like a startable guy. But interesting. How do you see that Panthers quarterback situation kind of playing out? That's a team that is really in a period of transition right now. So what are you thinking with Bryce Young in that situation?
Well, and Bryce Young, speaking of a quarterback who, and he was 101, 102 in rookie drafts last year, or 2 years ago, sorry, had a horrible year, and his value was insulated. incredibly insulated, as a matter of fact, right? Like, I mean, he fell, but you were still able to easily get a first-round rookie pick for Bryce Young in the offseason.
Which is striking given how truly awful he was. Like, if you don't remember, go back and look at Bryce Young's stats from last year. They were unbelievably bad, and it looked worse if you were watching the games. Like, it was, but so that just backing up your point there.
But so he is, and again, I mean, he's played 7 games this year. Again, I mean, just the last couple games have obviously been promising, because before that, it was just atrocious, right? I mean, he's throughout the course of the season, he's thrown 4 touchdown passes.
Yeah, they were all in the last 3 games.
Right, to 6 interceptions, right?
Yeah.
He's completing 60% of his passes. Like, he takes sacks at a decent rate. He's not pushing the ball down the field particularly well, right? And he isn't adding anything with his legs. He's got 71 rushing yards this year, which also just kind of blows my mind. But if he starts the rest of the year and he looks passable, I think that they might give him another shot. I'm not sure if they should or not, but it's the type of organization where I feel like David Tepper doesn't want to be wrong. And that Bryce was his boy, right? Despite, from the reporting that I had read, the rumblings inside that said Reich was looking at Stroud as a potential top pick. And of course, that turned out really well for one team and very poorly for another. And so I think if he can string together some games that keep them competitive, where the offense is designed around the play action and bootlegs to get him outside of the pocket so he can see more of the field, gets him to use his legs a little bit more, that he can save his job. But if, at least for 1 year. But I still would expect that they bring in competition. Now, if they do end up being competitive for the rest of the year, unless they're like close losses over and over again, if they are competitive for the rest of the year, then that says to me that their draft spot drops and they're less likely to use that capital on a quarterback, because they're not going to get one of the top in what looks to be a relatively weak quarterback class anyways. So then it's a matter of potential openings in the free agency market. Who is that? Is that a Justin Fields?
Daniel Jones.
Daniel Jones, yeah, right. Gardner Minshew.
Oh yeah,
right. So they might bring in some sort of competition there. Somebody that can push to potentially start more than an Andy Dalton. So there's a little bit of fire there. But he's, from a dynasty perspective at least, I don't think that you're getting anything on a sell, right? I was, just after he was benched, I don't know how this happened, but I was able to trade Geno, or acquire Geno for Bryce Young.
Jeez.
And I took that, obviously. And the other manager just said, "Listen, I'm tanking, and I'm going to try and hopefully get Young to have value gain in the future." And fair enough, and it looks like that might actually, and it might actually work out, right? As we're seeing now. But you're not going to get that type of return. I mean, Geno Smith is I think Geno Smith is the starter in Seattle for this year and at least next year. That's my opinion on it. I think he's played well despite a couple of rougher games. I think overall he's played well. You know,
He played
and
great the other day, and
you saw him lead that
huge
drive.
game, and
Absolutely.
like not many quarterbacks can do what he did in that game.
And so, looking at Young, then unless you're selling low, which seems odd, I think he's just kind of the type of quarterback you have to hold and hope that the competition that they bring in is not real competition. You know, that he has a decent enough end to the season that they give him that one more shot. And if that happens, that probably means Canales has figured something out. And you might be able to move off of him in the off season when there's a little bit more excitement, if there's been a stretch of 4 or 5 games where he looks like a serviceable quarterback.
I think the biggest barrier to that might be what their schedule looks like the rest of the season. You get Kansas City, Tampa, Philly, Dallas, Arizona, Tampa again, and Atlanta. That is, all of those teams are in playoff contention except for Dallas, and are really solid teams. And even as bad as Dallas has been, the one thing Dallas can still do and will presumably be able to do at that point in the season is get after the quarterback, which is something that Young struggles with. So it's going to be a real test for him to kind of play well in that stretch, and they may not win any of those games. So yeah, I think you nailed it though. I if I had to kind of, I don't think they would take a quarterback in the first round. Maybe they would snag one late, but I think what's more likely is they'll sign one of the cheaper free agents, whether that be like Gardner Minshew. I guess Trey Lance. Trey Lance might be out there. That could be an option. So I do think that is the more likely path there. So switching gears a little bit, a team that's in the news today because they fired their general manager, the New York Jets. Aaron Rodgers quarterbacking that team. He is not a young quarterback. He has not looked like a particularly good quarterback, and he's also not a good GM. He's brought in all of his friends, and they are not winning games. So what? I don't know what are you thinking with the Jets right now? What does the future look like for that team? That is a team that is definitely going to have to make a move at quarterback within the next probably 2 years at the latest. So what are you seeing there? I mean, it is a team with a lot of weapons now.
Yeah, and I saw that they fired Douglas this morning, and just prognosticating, but like I feel like that says to me that Rodgers might be gone. I know he said, "Oh, I'll probably play another year," but it just doesn't seem to make sense from the team's perspective.
Yeah.
Right? A new coach coming in, new general manager. Are they going to want to deal with Aaron Rodgers? And I'm not sure that they will. And I was looking at Spotrac today. So next year is the last year of his contract, right? It'll be a significant hit, I think. A dead cap, if they cut him, is $49 million, but the cap hit itself is only 23.5, which it's not nothing, but in the modern NFL, I think that's a cap hit that they might be willing to kind of take on. And so I think we might find a situation where we don't have an Aaron Rodgers and we don't have a Devontae Adams there again. And I think that the Adams thing was, he's there if Rodgers stays, and that's about it, right? That was kind of the 1-year rental. Let's see if it can work. Yeah. But I mean, I don't see any real opportunity for them to build an organization, build a team that can win in the medium to long term while he's there. And so it's just kind of, delaying the inevitable. I guess the question is whether or not Woody Johnson's going to do anything, right?
Yeah.
Some people say that maybe he'll get another position in the upcoming government, and that his brother will take over. But his brother didn't lead the team to the promised land either. So,
Right.
I mean, I guess that's all those things are up in the air. But I don't know. I see it as more likely than not that he is gone, but that the market itself, and we'll see how how the dynasty market reacts to the firing of Douglas. But up until this point, his I might play next year. The market, I think, was still assuming that you might get a year worth of play from him.
Yeah.
And so I would sell low. To be honest, I would just try and get what I can, escape, and what is that in a super flex league, a late second to right? I would take that in a heartbeat. Early mid third, probably I would take it, and I'll look like a fool, and that's okay. I don't care.
Or maybe if I don't know, just thinking if a contending team has Bryce Young or something like that, maybe that's a path, is to flip him for a player like that who could, Bryce Young has way more of a chance of gaining value than Aaron Rodgers does. So like 100%.
Trey Lance.
Trey, yeah. Man, I hope we get to see some Trey Lance the rest of the season. I've just been waiting for that. Like, why? Like, how bad must he look in practice if he's just not even getting a chance?
Right.
But Cooper Rush almost got some people killed last night, and I feel like at some point you just gotta. I think the Cowboys need to kick the tires and see what they have there. But yeah, I mean, Trey Lance could be a guy that we're talking about going in and competing for a starting job on one of these teams that are kind of in transition, like the Panthers. We'll see about the Jets. I mean, the Jets. How old is Tyrod Taylor now? He's sitting there.
He's around 35, isn't he?
He could be a stopgap type of player. I mean, the last time we saw him play he played for pretty good football last year for the Giants. Like, I don't know if he's part of their plans for, a post Rodgers transition, but right now the way it's looking for the Jets, they're in line. If the season ended today, they'd have the 7th overall pick. So I don't know. I mean, we'll see what direction they decide to go in, but it's definitely been a weird year. I mean, they're playing worse this year than they did last year with Zach Wilson. I mean, with Zach Wilson, they were in a lot of games, by and large, thanks to the defense. But yeah, I mean, for whatever reason, that team with some of the best offensive talent in the league. I mean, Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, Breece Hall, way better weapons than Bo Nix has, and they just haven't been able to put it together and seem like a team that could compete for a playoff spot.
I mean, they're clearly rudderless, right? Like, I mean,
yeah.
And it's I think it was Belichick on it might have been on like Monday Night Football, like with the Mannings there, saying on the Manning cast, saying, it's typical Jets, right? Ready, fire, aim, right? Just and since they got rid of Saleh, they're 1-5. Their defense has been horrendous, making mistakes that their defense didn't make, and there was going to be some regression because obviously that defense has been good for a long time, and it's very, very difficult to maintain that level of defensive efficiency year over year. But if there's one thing that Robert Saleh has consistently been able to do since his time with the 49ers is get fantastic defensive performances out. And so what they look like going forward is anyone's guess. But I do think that if I were to bet, it's going to be a world without Aaron Rodgers. And I think that that's probably the smart world for them.
It's the smart world for them. So that, to me, says he will definitely be rocking a Jets jersey next year.
You're probably right.
But we'll see.
Right.
We'll see. One last team to talk about, the Colts. It's been a weird year for them. I think last time we talked, they had just benched Anthony Richardson, or they were about to. I can't remember what that timing was. And now he's back and had a good game yesterday. He he played the way I think you're gonna. I he didn't throw the ball particularly well. But he found a way for them to win. He had a couple rushing touchdowns. Um, so hopefully he can hold that job and kind of be the guy going forward. I mean, it's not a situation where they're going to move on from him, I don't think. But how are you feeling about Anthony Richardson and the rest of the Colts right now?
I think I feel pretty good about the team overall. I mean, I think we've got some exciting players on that team that I'm wanting to acquire in Dynasty.
Mm-hmm.
I think the buying window on Richardson is gone, especially after the last game, and there's still some inefficiencies there, but obviously I think he had some 10 rushing attempts last game, and he put in the score there. He looked decent.
Obliterated the defender as he scored a touchdown. Just
obliterated the defender, and then he had the other play a little bit earlier on where he basically pushes off an attempted sack and makes a sidearm throw to Josh Downs.
Yeah.
And those are the
It's
things.
Probably unfair of me to say he didn't throw the ball well. He had a really solid game.
And so I think that, like I said, I think that buying window is done. Though if there is an opportunity, you might want to take a look, because they say that they're starting him for the rest of the year. The next and if he plays well enough, you're probably going to be looking again at a late first startup pick, early second startup pick in terms of his value. Right, so that's multiple firsts and most multiple first round rookie picks in most people's valuations, and so it's becoming a little bit cost prohibitive there. But for me, the interesting players are Josh Downs and Adonai Mitchell. I mean, those pass catchers are the ones that I'm most interested in. Have you been watching Downs and Mitchell at all this year?
Downs has really impressed me this year. I liked him coming into the year, and he showed a couple things last year, but this year he's really, it seems like, taken a step into being like he has wide receiver one potential, and he is absolutely showing that and has played really well. There was a kind of a narrative that, and I may have pushed this narrative a little bit, that Josh Downs would benefit more if Joe Flacco were in a quarterback. And I'm really not sure that's the case. I mean, he's been extremely consistent regardless of who is throwing the ball. And he's just a guy that gets a lot of separation and makes big plays, and is the guy that it seems like quarterbacks are looking to and high leverage downs. No pun intended. So I mean, he's a player that he's getting more expensive by the week if you're trying to acquire him, but I still think he's a buy. I still think he's a player you want to try to get. Adonai Mitchell, he's a guy. I kind of overlooked him a little bit coming out in rookie drafts. I did not pick him up very much, but he's a really good athlete, and kind of that seems to be. Yeah, he's kind of a raw athlete that is extremely fast, extremely big, and those are good qualities in a wide receiver. And it's interesting that Michael Pittman's been dealing with a lot of injuries this year, but he has faded a little bit, while those guys have kind of especially the last couple weeks broken out a little bit.
Yeah, and with Mitchell, I mean, the issue or the benefit of Mitchell is that on a per play basis, he has actually been quite incredible.
Yeah.
It's just that he's only playing, 40% of the snaps.
Yeah. Right.
And part of that is because we've seen this productivity from Alec Pierce.
Yeah.
who was a decently regarded prospect, but nothing incredible. And that's kind of eaten directly in. But I mean, you watch him play, and you can see that that big game potential from him. You can see that kind of game breaking speed, and so I'm excited about him. I know that, like you said, he's dealing with some injuries. Pittman. I want nothing to do with the man. I mean, he's a good player. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing against him, but I want nothing to do with him.
Yeah. Yeah, and they just paid him too. There's a lot of good talent in that with the Colts wide receivers. I mean, Alec Pierce. I was just looking at league leaders in receptions yards today, and he's like top 25. Let me find it. Alec Pierce is 22nd in the NFL in receiving yards, 590 receiving yards on 44 receptions.
That's incredible.
Yeah, 22 yards per catch, which is tops in the league, just above Jameson Williams. So he's kind of. I mean, you look at Alec Pierce and Jameson Williams' stats, and they're almost identical. I think Jameson Williams played 3 fewer games, but of those guys, like guys that are, if you're looking for production this year, it seems like Downs is going to be the most consistent guy this year. But all of those guys, with the exception of Pittman, who we just talked about, they're guys that you are worth a look if you're able to acquire them. I think Pierce is like, I don't know how this isn't sustainable. And he may be the odd man out there, but yeah, I'm going all in on Josh Downs. I think he is a extremely talented wide receiver on in an offense that is hopefully on the way up. And I was just looking at Anthony Richardson. Like, he had those really bad games right before he got injured. He had a horrible game against Chicago. But Chicago's and he had a pretty bad game against Green Bay also. But those defenses have been pretty stout against the pass. He's kind of beaten the defenses you'd expect a quarterback to beat this year. I mean, they had a big game against the Jets yesterday. So he's been bad at times, but it hasn't. I don't know. He's been bad against the teams you would expect him to be bad against, I guess is what I'm trying to get at here. And he's been good against the teams you'd expect him to be good against. So I don't know if I feel I thought it was weird that the Colts benched him, but at the same time, that let him avoid playing against Minnesota, who might have the best pass defensive scheme in the league this year. It was also against Buffalo, who really tough on defense against quarterbacks. So yeah, it's kind of I'm glad Richardson had that game. Hopefully it buys him the job the rest of this season and into next year. And I don't know if I see him being as high in startup drafts though, unless he really like keeps this up the rest of the season. I think he might slip a little lower into the. I could see him going more in the range of like Dak Prescott was going this year, like that second round. So I do see his value taking just the slightest hit. I can't imagine him going in the late first, but I could be totally wrong about that. Because Justin Fields was still going in that range going into last season. So it does take a lot to knock down the value of a really prized quarterback asset in Superflex. Because just like the NFL, you kind of have to be secure at that position to have success.
We saw it with Trey Lance, right? Trey Lance basically never played a snap, and he was going no later than the mid-second in startups for
that's true.
A year and a half. So it's
that
tough.
Is true, yeah.
If he falters down the stretch, then I think that you're probably right. But I think that if he gives you performances that are similar to what you saw on Sunday, even if a bit down, then the hype train will roll again for sure.
That's true. Yeah.
What do you think? Just you were saying going all in on Downs. How do you value a player like Downs? Because is he the number one on his team? Obviously they paid Pittman like the number one. He missed some time, so I don't know exactly what his snap share is. Both Pierce
Right.
and Pittman over the course of the year have, are in the 82 to 85% snap share, and Downs is around 67. But I mean, he obviously missed a tiny bit of time there.
Yeah.
So let's say that he's actually closer to around 80. They're all roughly full-time players.
Mm.
Where do you put him value wise?
Yeah, that I mean, I struggle with that. I struggle with how to put like a set value on a guy. I think what's interesting about him is you're right about his snap share, but his targets have been really consistent. Like he's been in like the 8 to 10 target per game range in all the games he's been healthy for, and I think that says a lot about his talent and the trust that his quarterbacks have had in him. And I think I think that wins out for these types of players. When he's on the field, he's commanding targets. I think, I mean, would you say like a late first? Like is he in that range for
Yeah,
you?
yeah. I mean, he's about that. I think he's around a late first. If you think that you're getting, so he's a year
Like,
two player and he's having,
yeah,
kind of a mini breakout. Like he's not having that massive one that maybe you'd want from a year two player. But I think like you're seeing a solid progression from him in terms
yeah,
of his usage and the stats that you're seeing. I was taking a look at it, and yeah, you're right. So yeah, he's played 64% of the snaps compared to say 86 for Pittman. Um, he still has out targeted Pittman by 6 targets.
hmm,
Um, he has a 2% higher target share. Again, on less snaps, he's 22% to Pittman's 20.
yeah,
Um, he has 15 more receptions. And the thing that kind of blows my mind is that he is catching 70% of the balls thrown his way compared to 54% for Pittman.
jeez, yeah. I mean
Right? Like,
that's with Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco, who at this point in Flacco's career and all of Richardson's career at this point aren't viewed as like the most accurate passers. So like he's yeah, I mean he's taking advantage of the time that he's out there. He kind of had to be an outlier coming out just because of his size. Like he's listed at 5'9", 170. Like he's not he does not fit the typical mold of a wide receiver one, and that I think that's a legitimate concern if you're really investing in a player. Um, so I kind of view him in a similar way to like Xavier Worthy, even though they don't really play the same type of game, but I kind of value them similarly. And Worthy was kind of going in that late first round, so that's kind of where I kind of landed with that. But I just like the player, definitely rooting for him.
yeah,
And the
me
Colts
too.
are a fun team. Colts are a fun team. They're right there in that playoff hunt. So these players are going to be, they're going to be there for you the rest of the season, which you can't always count on with teams that are out of the playoffs. Speaking of teams that are out of the playoffs, let's talk about our wish casts from last time. Aaron, I don't know if you remember, you were hoping for Jonathan Brooks to exist, and he hasn't yet.
This week, he's going to
This
exist.
is the week.
That's what they said. He's going to play this week.
And in the meantime, I think this happened after we last recorded. They gave Chuba Hubbard like a pretty decent contract for like a replacement level running back. Like it was like 4 years, 60 million, something like that.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. It was a solid. It wasn't 60 million, but it was a solid in like the 12 to 13 million range per year, which
Yeah.
for a running back is
Okay, it
like,
was 4 for 33. Yeah.
oh, four. Oh, okay. So then we're both wrong. So it's about eight
Yeah,
and
we're
a
both
half a
wrong.
year, but still.
I mean I mean any extension for a running back is shocking at this point in the NFL. So like it was definitely I was not expecting, and I've
And he deserved it, right? Like, I mean, he's
he's
played
played
really
great.
well. Yeah.
Yeah. He's just a really good football player. I don't think I describe him as, I think he is like the epitome of a replacement level running back, and that's not that's not a knock. Like that is there's a role for players like that in the NFL, as we've seen this year. He's been their best offensive player. So good for him. It's always good to see, especially given the running back landscape. It's always good to see those guys get paid. But yeah, hopefully Jonathan Brooks comes back this week. My wishcast was about Jalen Polk. I don't know, man. I feel like it might be over before it even got started. He just isn't anything right now. He scored a touchdown, but it was the only catch that he had since the last time we talked, and it was a 2-yard touchdown. Javon Baker got into the game and made some plays this past week. Maybe he will be the wide receiver from that draft class that steps up. Actually, no, he didn't. I'm wrong. I saw he had fantasy points. This is why I saw he had fantasy points. It was from kick returns, not from making any catches. He played 7% of snaps. So neither of those rookies are doing anything in New England. But Kendrick Bourne is back, so that's fun. What are you thinking for the upcoming time? What are you hoping happens over the next couple of weeks?
So we're making that push for the final 3 weeks before we hit the playoffs in most leagues, right? Hopefully you do 3 weeks of playoffs. Top 2 teams get the bye if you're in a standard league, is often the case. And the bane of my existence has been quarterback decisions in a lot of my leagues. And so, in a few of them, it's been starting Joe Burrow when Jaden Daniels goes off, and then starting Jaden Daniels when Joe Burrow goes off. It's cost me about 3 matchups in a league that I would be competitive in if I had not, or if I had made the correct decision. But the other one that has really messed me up this year, and a lot of people, is Patrick Mahomes. I'm doing quite well in a couple of leagues where I've got Mahomes, but every single week I look at Patrick Mahomes and Matthew Stafford and Baker Mayfield and random other quarterback, and I think, well, this week is probably the week that it works for Mahomes, and then it doesn't. And so my wish cast is going to be focused on Patty there, who currently sits, in I guess PPR points per game, although not that it really matters, but as a quarterback 14, behind Sam Darnold and Geno Smith and Bo Nix and Baker Mayfield, and and just barely ahead, 0.1 point ahead of Kirk Cousins and just ahead of Justin Herbert. Although I don't know if this includes the last games. I think it does. Yeah, it does. And just ahead of Aaron Rodgers. So it goes to show that Patrick Mahomes has not been it, as the kids say. He is not him, and so my wish cast is starting this week against the Carolina Panthers. I believe they play the Panthers this week, if I'm not mistaken. And going forward, that Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs become Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs once more, and that he can provide me with a solid 20 points per game rather than the 15.8 that he's currently averaging.
Man, that was beautiful. It's been a weird year for Mahomes. I just pulled up his. He has 2 QB1 performances, and that's it. Top 12 performances, but he also hasn't been horrible. Like it's his floor, his lowest scoring game was 14 points against the Chargers, a really solid defense. So I don't know if that makes it better or worse. Like because when you're facing that lineup decision, you kind of have that like baked in floor that you can't stop thinking about. But you don't draft Patrick Mahomes or trade for him to be, a mid range QB2. You want him to be the best player in the sport, and he hasn't been. So yeah, I'm rooting for him too. I have some places where I definitely need him to show me more. I have a couple Mahomes Kelsey stacks that I did not do well this past week. So,
And I want you to know
yeah.
why. I want you to know why this is a wish cast, because it's a wish.
Yeah.
So again, this week he plays the Panthers. Next week he plays the Raiders,
Mm-hmm.
which that's pretty lovely. I don't mind that. Week 14 he plays those Chargers again.
Mm-hmm.
Week 15 he plays the Browns, which they're still a solid defense. They're not the best, but they're still a solid defense. Week 16 he plays the Texans. And week 17 he plays the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah.
And
That's
so
a
he doesn't
playoff
have the fantastic playoff schedule that we're all
Yeah.
hoping for. But my hope is that they are pushing for that loss to the Bills. Maybe sparks a bit of offensive push, and that they're pushing for the number 1 overall seed in the East, in the AFC, and that that gets me over that 15.8 point hump all the way up to 20.
There you go. All right. Yeah.
What about you?
So I think this season, I think Jawan Jennings has become maybe my favorite NFL player. I just love the way he plays. It is, and it's been so fun to watch him actually be like he's always been a factor in that offense, but it's been kind of invisible. And now he is extremely visible. Like he was the best player on the field for them and down the stretch of that game this past week. And I've ended up with him in a lot of places just because he was extremely cheap and I like the player. And he had the 49ers won the Super Bowl last year, I think he may have been Super Bowl MVP. Like
he absolutely would have been.
He's just awesome. He does everything well. I am hoping that over the next couple of weeks, as we do this playoff push, that he can continue being a wide receiver 1 must start option. So I'm really wishing that he just continues doing what he's been doing the last 2 weeks. And he should. I mean, he's really stepped up. If one of the, Debo, Ayuk, or Kittle is out, he's kind of been the guy that steps up. And, Ayuk's out for the season. Kittle was out last week. It looked like Pearsall might kind of take some of those targets and snaps away. And that definitely wasn't the case with Kittle out this past week. So I hope that he can continue to be a reliable starter. Not the boldest of asks, but I feel like I went super bold last week with Jalen Polk and got me nowhere. So against Green Bay, I mean, they got 2 tough matchups. Green Bay and Buffalo are both tough on the road. So yeah, I'm hoping Jawan Jennings continues to be the guy getting double-digit targets and just gaining 6 extra yards on a play where he should have been tackled immediately. Just dragging players. He's just so good. So yeah. And you as a 49ers fan are rooting for that.
I absolutely am.
Well.
I think, I love Jennings. He got the new contract in the offseason, not big money, but, 2 years at $15.5 million or something. Yeah. And I think they guaranteed him about eight and change. And, just signaling that they want him to be part of the offense. Yeah. And he's been all that and more for them this year. He, like you were mentioning, and like I kind of jumped in and said, he absolutely would have been the Super Bowl MVP if they won that game. He throws a touchdown pass, right? He caught 2.
He caught 1, I think.
He caught 1. Yeah, that's right. It was just clutch for them over and over and over again.
And he's their third down. He's their high leverage receiver right now. Like that's who Purdy's looking to. It's. I love to see it. He's just
so. And just similar to you, late in a lot of startup drafts in the offseason, I was picking up Jawan Jennings, especially in Dynasty Best Ball, right? He's just the type of player that he has. We often talk about contingent value for running backs. He is very, very much a playmaker in an offense that has contingent value at the wide receiver position. Kittle goes out, or Debo goes out, or Ayuk goes out. Jawan Jennings fills a role for them. And like you said, I mean, Purdy is turning to him. He's reliable. He's that possession receiver. He's not a big yak man, but he'll go up and get you the ball. It's 3rd and 9, 3rd and 7. You need 8 yards, 10 yards. That's where Purdy's looking, and he's coming down with the ball more often than not. So
yeah, and
I like that one.
2 weeks. The snapshot of the last 2 weeks, 91% and 95%. He's on the field a lot now, and it's really good. Since coming back from injury, he's out there almost every play. He's a great run blocker, so they keep him out there all downs. Great guy. Hope he continues to have success. Aaron, where nowadays can people find you?
Sure. So you can find me on X or Twitter at Aaron Spires, and you can also follow me on Blue Sky, also at Aaron Spires, with all of the alphabet at the end of that, dot Blue Sky Social or whatever it is, but at Aaron Spires on both of those, and otherwise you can find me in the snow.
No, yeah. Cool. Yeah, find me on Blue Sky. Derek Adam Thomas, I think. I don't know, I'll put a link somewhere. But yeah, and if you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe. You'll get the next episode whenever it comes out. And go out there and do what you need to do to make your Dynasty team as good or as bad as it needs to be right now. Thank you, Aaron, and take care.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe wherever you watch or listen to podcasts. Follow on X and Instagram at OUSFFPOD. We'll be back next week for more ways to win your league.